Everything is not as tranquil as it seems for the Kansas City Chiefs and what they're doing with their defense. Deep into the linebacker core today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. You can download that app, put in your account, and then use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $20 off of your first ticket purchase. Terms do apply. Terms always apply, and whether it's inside linebacker, outside linebacker, Sam, Will, etc., we're going to go through today the state of the Chiefs linebacker core. And the guy that is going to make the biggest impact this season, we think, is probably going to be different. We're going to find out whether we agree or not. This is Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. He's going to run it all down on his Substack. You can find that at KC Chiefs Corner. Stats, cap, quarterbacks, the whole 9 yards. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting. You can find me there as well as NFL 33 and RGR Football, where we do a little bit of everything over there. I'm looking forward to this discussion because you guys are with us every single day. We appreciate that. You locos are why we do the show, and we love seeing you guys. So thank you for subscribing to this channel where you can like and sub, or hitting Spotify or Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform that's free. You can find us 5 days a week plus. And if you want that much more, you can get on the text line at 816-357-8781. We're looking forward to this. And it all comes down to has to be a deeper position than it has been in years past because of a couple of rule changes. There are two very, very important guys, and it's going to be a contract year for one. We'll talk about Nick Bolton coming up here in a little bit. But the biggest change, and I think the biggest impact at the linebacker core for me, is going to be Drue Tranquill actually being a full-time starter and moving to what is a dedicated position for the most part because of the departure of Willie Gay. I'm pretty comfortable with this, but the athleticism isn't quite the same. The comfort in that role probably isn't quite the same, but Tranquill going from a guy that is a jack of all trades in this defense to having a more defined and sustained role, I think is actually good for the defense, and he might be the difference maker.
He definitely could be, and I think it's going to be good for him to be having. If you look back at last year and you look back at what he was doing in training camp and you look back at what he was doing in the preseason and early in the season, he was playing multiple roles. He was having to be the jack of all trades. Now he gets to go into a season knowing what his role is going to be, knowing where he's going to be, and stepping into a position where I think he's going to be more comfortable than what he was having to be basically the guy that comes in in certain packages. So I think that that's a good thing for this Chiefs defense. And I think that when you look at what he's able to do for this defense, I think you're right. It's not the same speed. It's not the same agility as Willie Gay, but it should be pretty comparable to an extent. And I do think that it's going to be a better position this year, assuming all three linebackers stay healthy. And we're going to talk about Nick Bolton in the next segment. And the other guy that I'm excited about, Leo Chanel, in a little bit later on. But you look at what all this is going to mean for this linebacker core, getting people to be in their specific positions and not having to move somebody around and not having a fourth guy that's going to be coming in different packages, I think is a good thing for this defense overall.
I agree with you. I think it simplifies some things. What we saw in the last rotation, obviously Willie Gay was the fastest athlete at the linebacker group, but maybe not the most instinctual in coverage. He ended up, as his career progressed in Kansas City, making a lot of big plays. Really appreciate Willie for that. And I feel like Drue Tranquill isn't quite the athlete, but his instincts and his experience make up for the difference. Now, instead of having to switch those guys out at times situationally, it's going to be just a subtraction. If you're going to go from the base defense to your main nickel, you're going to have Nick Bolton and Drue Tranquill on the field. All you're doing is having Leo either drop down to an edge rush position or come off the field instead of doing this wholesale package switch. That cleans things up. It makes the calls faster and simpler for Spags. And honestly, I think the key for all that is just making sure that you have those two guys, healthy. We saw Nick Bolton take a couple things, whereas Drue Tranquill, I think, played through probably more nicks and knacks than we were led on, but it's about the conditioning as well. These guys are going to play more snaps per person, I think, this season than we saw last year, and that's okay. Just got to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do when you start talking about packages, not just nickel, but when you get into dime packages. What are you going to do? Who are you going to leave on the field? who is going to move completely off the field? Are you going to leave Bolton on? Or are you going to leave Tranquill on? I think that you could go both ways. Depends on the situation. Depends on the play, really. But it's going to be interesting to see how they mix and match these guys. You're right. It's going to be better because they're both going to know what their role is, and it's going to be a lot cleaner. But there are still going to be some situations where, one may be on the field while the other isn't. And maybe you're going to see a situation where I wouldn't expect to see maybe Chanel and Bolton on at the same time and no Tranquill. But I guess maybe there's a short yardage scenario where that happens.
Yeah, sure. And honestly, there are certain backs that maybe that's going to preclude as well. They're going to see Derrick Henry this year, and there might be a reason to keep Leo over Drue. But overall, as the season goes on, Drue's for a lighter linebacker body style. He's a better run defender than he gets credit for. I think the big thing for me is when you take a look at the whole. This is a guy that brings the juice. The drop off of what I was worried about was from Willie Gay because he brings so much energy to the team. Drue Tranquill has a lot of energy as well. It's a little bit different. It's not the same kind of day-to-day, but he is fired up to be here. And at his point in his career, he is more, I think, motivated to make impact than maybe anybody else in the linebacker core. So you're getting the best years, by my estimation, of Drue Tranquill's career right now, and he is super fired up for it.
Yeah, and I will say I do think he is a good run defender. I just think that there's going to be certain scenarios, like you said, about Derrick Henry, where maybe he comes off the field because it's a lot. That's a lot of guy to bring down. You're going to be going up against a Baltimore team that's going to want to run the ball a ton. So there are still going to be situations where I think you're going to see Tranquill rotate off at times. But overall, I think he's going to be playing, I would say, depending on the team, probably somewhere 75, 80% of the snaps, maybe even higher, depending on the team. It's going to be a lot different than it was last year, and I think it's going to be better for him, and it's going to be better for the Chiefs defense overall.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. It all comes down to how you use the linebacker at which opponent and how successful you can be at what you're asked to do. That changes, I think, this year for the other key linebacker on this group in Nick Bolton. We're going to get to him and what he means coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, there are a lot of games. And it doesn't matter whether you're trying to get to Baltimore in week 1 or if you're aiming a little bit farther down the season like I am when the Denver Broncos come to town or the Tampa Bay Bucks. I'm looking week 9, 10, that kind of thing, and looking for tickets. Now at Arrowhead is the best time to do it. You can get last-minute deals through Gametime, but they can help you right now when you want them the most, and that does help. Now, I can't say that I'll be that prepared, and I will likely drop in last minute, and if I do, I need those last-minute deals because you can get up to 60% off of last-minute sports, concerts, everything from comedy and theater and everything that you want to see. And more importantly to me, I love the zone deals because there are certain aspects of the stadium that I want to sit in, so I get the best view so I can break everything down for you all in a better way. It's all in pricing, gives you everything that you need right up front. There's no hidden fees or anything like that. And you get to see your view of the field in this case from anywhere on the app before you make the purchase. Take all the guesswork out of buying Arrowhead tickets, MLB tickets, or anything else that you're looking for right now with Gametime. Download that app, create your account, and use our code LOCKEDONNFL. It's going to get you $20 off of your first ticket purchase. Terms do apply. But again, all you got to do is create an account, redeem that code. That's LOCKEDONNFL, and you can get $20 off your first purchase. It's over at Gametime. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and it is guaranteed. And what we do next is focus on the echoes of Terez Paylor. Nick Bolton's in a contract year, and so I expect his best effort as ever. And this is one of those things that he can really change, I think, not only his future in his next contract, but his legacy as well. When he came out, I thought that he could be a man-the-middle linebacker that would have to come off in passing situations. He has proved to be better than that. I don't think that he needs to come off. There may be some situations where they choose to do that, but it's not an absolute need. So for Nick Bolton, the question for me becomes, how can he raise his game in a contract year to actually take it forward? Because he's out-projected himself. He's made key plays, even in Super Bowls. Like, I don't know there's a whole lot more other than just pure dominance. He has a knack for plays, but if he can do it week in, week out, and put that whole season together, I think that's going to be best for his career. It may not end up being in Kansas City, but it may be as well.
Well, and I think that he's extremely important to this defense. I think that he is I think Chris Jones is probably the heart and soul, but I think Nick Bolton is right behind him. You look at his importance to what this defense and the way he is always in the right place. He's always putting players in the right place. He knows his responsibilities. He knows pretty much everybody else's responsibilities as well. In a lot of ways, he's the captain of the defense. He's got the green dot on his helmet. I do think that, when you look at what he can do this year, the only thing that I would say that he probably needs to work on a little bit, that he needs to get a little bit better at, is pass coverage. And that's going to be a little bit tough. That's not his skill set. That's not something that he's been great at throughout his career. He's been absolutely better than what you expected, better than what I expected. But his speed is a little bit of an issue when you start talking about pass responsibilities. His instincts make up for the lack of speed. But that is the big question is can he step up and get his pass coverage a little bit better? If he gets his pass coverage a little bit better, you're in a much better situation at linebacker than you have been in the past couple of years. And you have two guys that potentially could be, guys that are getting 60, 75, 80 tackles apiece between Tranquill and Bolton, maybe even more than that if they stay healthy. So it should be a lot of fun. And I think Bolton is going to have a big year. And you're absolutely right. As Therese Paylor always says, the contract here is undefeated. And Bolton came out and said he doesn't want to get paid until after his contract is up. So that's the other side of it.
Yeah. And you want to get every play in that you can, especially when you're at a linebacker position that has been downplayed across the league in the last few years. So your impact plays are probably fewer opportunities, right? But he's made the most of them to this point. If he and Drue Tranquill continue to take the next step forward, and I thought they turned into a very good duo to begin with, but they can take that to the next level for both of these guys being uber motivated. This could be the thing where, especially in a league that is starting to swing back towards balance, they have to be able to defend the run a little bit better because teams think and know that they can run on them, right? If you look at years past. So now you have to have, without changing the body type or changing the defensive front, you have to have linebackers that are able to take on the run game and guards in particular and win better. That's going to be, I think, the difference in this particular season as teams start to try and do what other teams have been successful but weren't able to buy into. And that comes down to Bolton filling gaps. And as you said, making sure everybody's aligned correctly so that they don't have to drop off from last season down to this season. You need to be within range, say, I don't know, still got to be a top 12 defense, in my opinion, in order to help the offense continue to progress to the point where you can lean on them more a little bit.
Yeah, and I know we already talked about defensive tackle, but that's one of the biggest things. When you start talking about linebackers, one of the biggest things when it comes to the running game is the defensive tackles. And it's defensive tackles not necessarily just making the stops themselves, but keeping the linebackers clean. Allowing Nick Bolton and allowing Drue Tranquill and allowing a guy like Leo Chanel to flow to the ball and be able to make the tackle because they're not getting a guard or a center or a tackle up on them at times. The better you can be up front and the better you can keep your linebackers clean, the better the running defense is going to be. And the nice thing about when you look at what Bolton brings to the field is while his speed may not be elite, his instincts are very elite. And he is always in the right place where he's supposed to be. It's more of a question of, can he stay clean? Is he staying clean? If he stays clean and off a blocker, he's going to make the tackle. He's going to be in the hole and he's going to take care of it. That's the big question, though, is can you keep him clean? Can you get him to a point where he's not having to shed as many blockers? If you can do that, he's going to have an even better season than what he's had in the past. And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch because this linebacker group has a lot of talent and it has the ability to keep most teams from being able to run the ball. I won't say completely against the Chiefs, but more than effectively against the Chiefs. Like if you can keep teams to 70, 80 yards on the ground, I think you got to feel pretty good about that, especially considering the Chiefs are more than likely going to be putting up more points than they did last season.
Yeah, you got to hope and think so. You mentioned something very important is the depth. There's going to be natural attrition. Somebody's going to miss a game during this season. We talked about the two most important players. Now, Leo Chanel is going to lead the next group, and I won't even call him a backup, but how deep is this group and what does it bring that they haven't had in the past? How often will we see them? That's coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, if you want all your 24/7 coverage of every sport that matters to you that's going right now, get over to Locked On Sports today. It's here on YouTube and on Amazon Fire TV. Depth is always a concern at the linebacker level because linebackers have to do a lot of the dirty work, particularly on special teams. You used to keep a linebacker or two around specifically for teams so you could fill that out. You didn't use them for gunners or a lot of the speed outside stuff. That may be changing now. You're still going to have gunners on punt. The kickoff might look very different. We're going to see what Dave Toub comes up with. But I feel like depth at linebacker may be more important this year than it has any year of the Reed era to this point. Where are you on it?
No, I absolutely agree. And, as you said before this segment started, Leo Chenal's not really a backup. He is a starter. He is a starter in their base. He may not see the percentage of snaps that most starters would, but that's because the league has gone to nickel so much. The nice thing is if Kansas City can figure out the coverage and Tranquill on the field, maybe you have a situation where against some teams you're able to leave your base on the field when even if you're supposed to necessarily go in a nickel because you have 3 wide receivers because you feel comfortable enough with Tranquill being able to handle some of the wide receivers that are going to be the third on some of the teams they'll play, and that gives you even more ability to play against the run. So the thing that I'm going to be interested in is how many are they going to keep this year? I mean, we start talking about depth. That's what it's going to come down to. Are they going to have to keep 6 linebackers? Generally speaking, they've kept 5. But because of kickoff rules, it's a possibility that you're looking at a situation where you're going to be keeping 6. We've talked about this when it comes to specialists. We talk about this when it comes to the corners to an extent. But not having to have the speed that you used to have on a kickoff because you're only covering maybe 20 or 30 yards is a lot different, and it's going to change what teams are going to keep at different positions.
Absolutely. And I think having similar matched athleticism there, speed overall, is going to help because now on a tightened scale, if your edges are pinching because they're super fast, you're creating horizontal and honestly 45-degree gaps for returners to take. So you really want to have a little bit more uniform approach and just kind of squeeze the circle. It does make sense, in my opinion, to keep more linebackers. Now, like we said, Leo Chenal is not a backup. He is the base starting Sam, and that means he's going to be over the tight end for the most part, allowing Drue Tranquill to be the will and stay off the line of scrimmage and be able to move. Now, that is the base defense, but that's not the most common defense the Chiefs run. The Chiefs start as a nickel defense with 2 linebackers on the field. That is their base. Yep. When they go what is really to a 3-linebacker set, it's more of a heavy look from Spags. So, yes, Leo Chenal is the 3rd linebacker on this roster, but you have to have backups, I think, at each position this year for kickoff and for anything that goes wrong. They have a lot of athleticism back there. They have guys with experience like Jack Cochran and Cole Christensen, who's done a little bit of a merry-go-round. He was released and then brought back just because of some of the 90-man rules. But he is still there, and they do like that he has experience in the defense, experience on teams that will help. The primary backup in my opinion, at all 3 positions is Cam Jones because he's the best athlete. He can do a little bit of everything. I don't want him to have to be taking on offensive tackles. In certain situations, Leo will be over a tight end. If they motion that tight end away, he's basically looking at the tackle. And I don't know that Cam Jones can really be excelling in that kind of role, but that's the chance you take. He will give you coverage at the other 2 positions. He'll be able to run and hit. With Jack Cochran and Cole Christensen, that's probably the top 6 to me. Do you see it the same way? And is there somebody behind them that you think should pop up?
I'm really curious to see what Curtis Jacobs has got. There's been a ton of talk about him in minicamp and OTAs. And Christensen, you're right. Christensen and Cochran have experience, and the Chiefs appreciate what they bring to the team. But there's a reason that they released Christensen when they could have released a guy like Curtis Jacobs. So I know they brought Christensen back, and I do think that he could be possibly still ahead of Jacobs to an extent. But I think that Jacobs has an outside chance of making this roster, and maybe it's better than an outside chance. We're really going to find out when the pads come on and when you start seeing probably, I would say, week 2, week 3 in training camp, when you've seen enough from some of the players to see, okay, we know what this guy can do. We need to see what this guy can do against another level of competition. And that's when you sit there and you look at a guy like Curtis Jacobs and say, okay, is he running with the second team yet? Because I could see a scenario where maybe he comes in and runs with the second team and he doesn't give the position up. That's what we've seen in what we've heard so far in OTAs and in mini camp. Training camp's a whole different ballgame. Pads are going to be on. You're going to be hitting people. Just knowing and having the speed to get to the right place is not going to be as important as being able to do it physically. Just because you know what you need to do doesn't mean that you can actually do it. So we'll see if he can do it. If he can put something on tape and he can do things in training camp, he has a chance at making this roster. And I agree with you, Cam Jones is probably the fourth linebacker. The question is 5 and 6, and who are they going to keep out of that group?
Agreed. I think the other thing that is a little bit misleading, people don't quite realize, is yes, Curtis Jacobs is one of the better athletes of this group. I wouldn't put him ahead of Cam Jones and Drue Tranquill, but I would say he's probably third in overall athleticism here. And yet he is also the second largest and heaviest linebacker. Leo Chenal weighs in at 252 at 6'3". Curtis Jacobs is only like 10 pounds lighter than him at 241. Noticeably, at least by my count, 5-6 pounds heavier than every other linebacker is listed. Now that varies. We all know that changes throughout the season, but there is that aspect of there's no true thumpers in this defense anymore. But if you need somebody that can take on and have a little bit more anchor in particular against guards, Jacobs might be the second choice behind Leo Chenal at this point. I think that's probably another leg up for him.
Yeah, and you look at the other guys that they have in let's see, is it Sways Bozeman? Quite the name there. It's going to be interesting to see what he's able to bring during training camp. And then the other one would be LaQuay Washington. Both of those guys are going to have a very hard time, in my mind, making the roster. I'm not going to say it's not possible. Obviously, like I said, when the pads come on, that's when everything's going to make a big difference. And we'll see in training camp who's able to do what. The big thing when you start looking at, and this is the same thing that we always say, but for those of you that are new, if you want to know who's going to be making this team, be sure to watch and key in on special teams, the first couple of special teams units in the preseason games, because those are the guys that they're trying to make sure that they know their assignments and get acclimated, because those are the guys they think are going to make the team, and they can be your special teams guys for the season.
You're absolutely right. Always got to pay attention all the way down there. And we're going to break it down for you. We will have our roster prediction coming up here next week. Tomorrow, Matt Derrick joins me. And then back on Friday, we are going to get back to another position to break it down and who can make an impact there. So don't miss it. If you have not found us before, Chris and I have been running this show for 8 years. This is the way we do things to get ready for camp. And then boom, we're off and running as soon as the team hits the field. So be prepared. Listen to us. We're here every single day of the week for you. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell here on YouTube and join us. Get subbed on podcast platforms, wherever you like them, either Spotify, Apple Music, or anywhere you get a free show. You can get us 5 days a week. Now, I'm looking forward to it. We'll see what Matt has as his insights. Our insider on the beat is Matt Derrick. He'll be joining me tomorrow. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We have a great lineup for the next couple of weeks before training camp opens. Be with us. Thank you for your time today and listening, and we'll talk to you.